Greetings, my dear viewer. My name is Anthony, and I'm very grateful that you're giving your precious time to my channel. This story begins with Matteo, who believes his life is perfect. He's married to Emma, his high school sweetheart, with whom he's spent 10 years in marriage. However, a casual remark from his friend Carter, hinting at Emma's infidelity, makes Matteo start to wonder. Events begin to unfold rapidly, revealing the shocking truth of Emma's hidden life. Get comfortable, my dear viewer, because now you're about to learn all the details. In high school, I was the typical diligent student, skillfully balancing academics, sports, and time with friends. While I wasn't among the most popular, I had a small circle of close friends who meant the world to me. It was during this time that I met Emma. She had a smile you couldn't easily forget, and a wit that matched my own. We quickly bonded over shared interests, and our friendship grew strong. By senior year, we were inseparable, and people saw us as the classic high school couple. Life felt almost perfect. Emma and I planned to go to the same university, and I was certain about our future together. We often talked about marriage, even imagining our lives after school. We began dating in 10th grade, and by senior year, our relationship was stable and solid. High school passed without major issues, and after prom, we grew even closer. We agreed to deepen our relationship but decided to postpone serious decisions, like marriage, until after college. However, once college began, Emma's priorities started to shift. In high school, everyone knew we were together, and I didn't worry about anyone showing interest in her. But college was different. Most people didn't know our history. They only saw a beautiful, self-assured young woman. Emma attracted attention wherever she went. I noticed it, but much was beyond my control. Our schedules rarely aligned. Different majors and classes meant we mostly saw each other in the evenings. Over time, Emma changed. She became more flirtatious, and I occasionally saw her laughing and chatting with other guys around campus, always far enough away not to notice me. There were moments in the cafeteria when I saw her absorbed in conversations, sometimes with one guy, sometimes with two others. Eventually, I realized she was rarely with girls. Almost always, she was surrounded by guys. I tried not to read into it, reassuring myself that our love and commitment could withstand any outside interest. After all, she was with me, and I believed in that. We graduated college, found jobs, got married, and began a life together that seemed nearly flawless. For 10 years of marriage, I believed this unconditionally, until everything fell apart. Reality hit me unexpectedly. One day at work, Molly from the mailroom handed me a file. I was surprised to find it on my desk because it contained client data managed by my old friend, Carter Lopez. While reviewing the document, I noticed a significant error. The financial forecasts were understated by nearly $2 million. I was about to double-check the figures when Carter burst into my office, visibly anxious. "Have you seen this file?" he asked. "I need to make a copy and present it to the company in 20 minutes. "I've got it here," I replied, "and it's good that I looked at it." I pointed out the discrepancy and added, "You should review this before the meeting." Carter turned pale. "This could have cost me my job. I need to fix it right away," he muttered, taking the file and hurrying out of the office. That Thursday, Emma was working late, preparing the payroll for Friday, so I decided to stop by a bar for a burger and a couple of beers before heading home. As I finished my meal, Carter walked in, noticed me, and sat across from me. Ordering a beer, he nodded in my direction. "The least I can do for the man who saved my job today," he said. I shrugged, not minding the company. We talked a bit about work, covering standard topics until Carter suddenly changed his tone. "Matteo, I need to ask you something," he said, leaning forward. "It may not be my place, but you're a good guy, and I like you. Why do you put up with everything?" When Carter's words reached me, I froze, feeling a wave of incomprehension wash over me. "What do you mean by, why do I put up with everything from Emma?" I asked, completely lost. He immediately clarified, without a moment's hesitation, "Why do you allow her to betray you?" I stood there, stunned, staring at him. What are you saying, Carter?" A flash of realization crossed his face, and he turned pale. "Oh, you didn't know?" He was about to leave, his body tense, but I quickly grabbed his arm. "Not so fast, Carter. You can't just say something like that and walk away. Sit down and explain." He sank heavily into the chair, visibly nervous, his words faltering. "Matteo, it's not easy. I don't know where to begin. Just tell me," I insisted. "I need to know, Carter." He shook his head, as if struggling to believe the situation. "Matteo, you've been together for so many years. You really had no idea? What exactly are you talking about?" I managed to keep my voice steady, though tension twisted within me. He looked down, avoiding my gaze. "Emma? She's been with others, Matteo. She's been unfaithful to you for a long time." A heavy silence settled between us, suffocating. My mind went blank, and Carter's face reflected regret. "I'm sorry, Matteo," he whispered. "I didn't mean to bring this up." "Well, you have now," I responded, forcing myself to think through the shock. "So tell me everything. How do you even know this?" Carter took a deep breath, his voice filled with regret and reluctance to continue. "I've known since our senior year, because I was one of them." My head spun, but I pressed on. "Then start from the beginning, Carter. Don't leave anything out." He began unraveling the story, each word peeling back layers of my past. It all began just a few weeks after graduation, as he explained. Carter had gone to visit his cousin George, expecting to spend time with him. But instead of finding George alone, he found him with Emma. "They saw me standing there. No one said anything," he continued. "So I joined them. We took turns, until she had to leave to meet you after your shift." He looked away, his voice fading. "It happened often, while you were at work. George stopped once he started dating Penelope Flores, but Emma didn't. Then she started showing up with Isaac Miller and Logan Davis. I joined again." He hesitated, as if weighing how much he should reveal. "There were 3 of us, sometimes even 5 or more. We weren't close friends, but at 18, it was all just fun." He looked at me, his expression a mix of regret and something else I couldn't place. "You and Emma were together, but it didn't seem to mean much to her. Otherwise, why would she do all of this?" The shock grew with each of his words, but he continued. "It didn't end after high school. College was the same." He looked me in the eye again. "I don't remember your schedule exactly, but I know you went to work after classes, and when Emma finished, she'd meet someone else. Wednesdays were her days to be with whoever. This went on for years. Her schedule might have changed, but one thing stayed the same. She was always with others while you were at work." His voice faded, and the silence that followed seemed to press down on me. Sitting there, trying to make sense of the stark truth laid bare, I felt the world around me start to crumble, and everything I thought I knew slipped from under my feet. "I don't want to give the impression that this happened every day. It didn't. Just a couple of times a week," he clarified. "We were all shocked when you married Emma. We thought you knew about her actions but chose to marry her anyway. Some thought you were one of those men who doesn't care if his wife is seeing other people. Tyler even speculated you might have an open marriage, but we never saw you with anyone else. Only Emma, and always with different men." "I didn't know, Carter," I finally forced out. "Damn, Matteo." Carter sighed. "I hate to be the one to tell you this, but since you seem to be unaware, I should mention that she has regular meetings on Thursdays with Alexander and Lucas Rodriguez. And on Tuesdays when you're at bowling, she's usually with Mark Willard. I don't know if there's anyone else, but if you're not home, there's a good chance Emma isn't either," Carter continued in a calm tone. After a pause, he added, "Not that it changes anything now, but I stopped seeing her after your wedding. Seeing a single woman is one thing, but interfering in a married relationship is something else entirely. Honestly, I don't know what to say, Carter. I don't know yet what I'll do, but I'll definitely do something, I replied, finishing my beer and getting up to leave. I turned to Carter before heading out. Thanks, Carter. Thanks for the burger, the beer, and for opening my eyes. On the way home, Carter's words replayed in my mind. Did I believe him? Part of me refused to accept it, convincing myself that Emma, who claimed to love me, couldn't possibly do this. But another part knew that Carter wouldn't lie about something so serious. He knew I'd verify his words, and if it turned out to be a lie, we'd have no chance of continuing to work together. The decision was simple. We couldn't. And Carter knew this as well as I did. Working alongside him after everything that happened with him and Emma would be difficult. But I believed that with time, we could get through it. After all, I too was once young. I remembered spending hours with Zach, thinking about girls. If I'd been offered what Carter had, and if Emma hadn't been around, I might have been tempted myself. But the main question now was, what should I do? I didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. Between Emma and me, it was over. Maybe I could forgive a one-time infidelity or even a short affair if she swore it was in the past, but years of deceit? No. That night, when Emma came home after work, I pretended to be asleep. I ignored her touch, thinking, she's offering me crumbs, and I no longer want to accept them. I'd played this role all these years without realizing it, but now, knowing the truth, her touch repelled me. For the first time, her touch stirred nothing within me. The next morning, I got up before her, made coffee, and was reading the paper when she came downstairs. "What was up with you last night?" she asked. "I came home in the mood and you were already asleep. That's not like you, Matteo." "Ate something that didn't agree with me," I lied. "Went to bed early because I felt queasy." "Well, I hope you're feeling better," she said with a playful smile. "You'll have to make it up to me later." At work, I called Felix Mather, a high school friend who'd become a corporate lawyer, and asked him to recommend a good divorce attorney. "Damn," muttered Felix. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, confused. "It means I didn't want to believe it was true," he replied. "That you'd actually need a divorce attorney. It means I thought there was something else between you and Emma, not what it turned out to be, and that you finally realized what's been going on all this time." I was taken aback. "What did you think we had?" I asked. "An open marriage? What else could it have been? How else could Emma do what she did and still stay with you?" Felix remarked, "Everyone saw how much she meant to you. I thought you'd be able to handle this." "Trust me, Felix," I replied. "Until yesterday, I had no idea what was going on." Silence filled the air before Felix finally suggested, "You should contact Tom Sweet. Tell him I sent you." I did just that. I called Sweet, mentioning Felix's name. Sweet offered to meet that same day if I could be there by 1 p.m. I agreed and arrived precisely on time. He laid out my options: a calm, controlled separation or an aggressive, merciless attack. "We're not in a no-fault divorce state," he explained. "Infidelity here is a strong reason for divorce, but you need irrefutable proof. Rumors won't cut it." "And how am I supposed to get such proof?" I asked. Sweet handed me a business card. "Gaston Marshall, private investigator." "His office is right across the street," Sweet added. "I can call him to see if he can take you right away." "Yes, thank you," I replied, deciding to act as swiftly as possible. Sweet made the call, and soon I was seated in Gaston Marshall's office, discussing the plan. The first rule was simple but essential: change nothing in my behavior with Emma. "She can't suspect that you know anything," Marshall emphasized. "You need to act completely naturally." The guidelines were clear. Stick to your usual routine. If you normally have intimacy 3 or 4 times a week, keep it that way. If you're usually the one to initiate, continue that way. But remember, this is no longer about love. It's just physical. After our meeting, I returned to the office, swallowed my pride, and called Emma at work. We had a tradition: dinner on Fridays and breakfast together on Sundays. When she picked up, I suggested, "How about dinner tonight at our favorite restaurant?" She agreed. That evening, she ordered rigatoni and a glass of white wine while I chose veal. By then, Marshall's team was already at our house, setting up cameras and audio equipment. As I sipped my wine, I recalled Marshall's instructions. "You may be tempted to check where the cameras are set up," he warned. "But don't do that. If she senses you're snooping, it could ruin everything. And be yourself in the bedroom, even if the thought of being recorded makes you uncomfortable. The cameras activate with sound and motion, so you'll be captured." Marshall pointed to a switch to turn off the cameras when I was home. "People often forget to turn them back on," he cautioned. "My advice, just leave them on. Think of it as filming a hot video." After dinner, I suggested, "How about a couple of drinks and some dancing?" "No," she replied. "Let's go home. You owe me for last night." On the way home, she slid closer, unzipping my pants. "Keep your eyes on the road, darling," she smirked. My thoughts were far from there. Her touch felt empty, just another act, one she'd likely repeated with others over the years. My disgust wrestled with my body's instincts, and soon it was over. When we arrived, she demanded, "To the bedroom! Now!" The thought of going through with Marshall's plan was unbearable. I couldn't ignore the cameras or the need to pretend. Instead, I found the switch and turned off the recording, leaving my phone on the car seat as a reminder to turn everything back on later. I wasn't sure if Emma noticed, but I couldn't bring myself to truly connect with her. I just did what was required. One time wasn't enough for her. She insisted on 2 more rounds before finally letting me sleep. The next morning, I was preparing for my usual run. Just before I left, Emma reminded me, "I'll be out when you get back. Hair appointment. It'll take all morning. I'll be back around 2. As long as I can remember, I'd always questioned how a salon appointment could take from 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Emma always claimed she lingered after her hair appointments to chat with other regulars, or occasionally have lunch together. While this might have been partly true, recent events made me wonder if she was meeting someone else, either before or after her visits. Before heading out for a run, I decided to activate the security system again. I didn't expect anything to happen while I was away, but it was time to get used to keeping it on whenever I left. This system only monitored the cameras. However, the audio and phone devices were always active. After my usual 5-mile run, I returned and went down to the basement, where I had instructed Marshall to install the recording equipment. I considered it the safest place, as Emma rarely came down here, especially to my work area. Inside the cabinet were 2 receivers, one for audio and phone tapping, the other connected to wireless cameras. I checked the phone tap recording, and my suspicions were immediately confirmed. I played the recording, and Emma's voice came through clearly. "Hello? Good morning, darling. Are we still meeting today?" asked a man whose voice struck me as unsettlingly familiar. "Absolutely," she replied. "My wife took the kids to the zoo, so we've got until 5 in the evening." "You know I can't stay that long," Emma replied. "I need to be home by 2. Otherwise, Matteo might start asking questions. He's already noticed I only get back by that time." The man suggested, "Then skip the hair appointment and come earlier." "Sure," Emma replied. "And what am I supposed to tell Matteo if he asks why my hair looks untouched after all those hours? I want more time with you, darling, but we'll have to make do with what we have." My heart pounded as I listened. I recognized the voice. It was my cousin, Lou. Rage flared within me as I went upstairs, wondering if Emma had also been involved with other family members. By the time she returned from her hair appointment, I had managed to calm myself. Keeping my composure, I decided to move forward with the plan and staged a fall down the basement stairs. "My back's killing me," I told her, hoping this excuse would give me a few days to avoid intimacy. On Monday, I called her at work and said, "I've got a business trip tomorrow and I won't be back until Friday, just in time to take you out for dinner." In reality, I had no intention of leaving. It might have been a waste of time, but I doubted that. My job usually required travel about once a month, and Emma was always home for our evening calls. I called at random times between 7 and 10 at night, so I didn't think she would wait for my call before leaving. If she was cheating as frequently as I suspected, it was quite possible she was even doing it in our own bed while talking to me. This was the goal, to catch her on camera, providing my lawyer with irrefutable evidence for divorce. That evening, Emma attempted to be affectionate. "I need something to get me through the next 3 nights while you're gone," she said. I thought, of course, how convenient, but responded, "My back still hurts too much." The next morning, she kissed me goodbye, suitcase in hand, as I left for my trip. I drove to work, stayed until 3 o'clock, then parked a block away from the house, laptop ready. Connecting to the monitoring software Marshall had set up, I tuned into the phone line. "Hello?" I heard Emma warmly greeting someone. "Hey, gorgeous, it's me," she said playfully. "How's it going?" the man replied. "The hubby just left on a 3-day trip. Ready to spend 3 wonderful nights with me?" He chuckled and replied, "Does a duck walk barefoot on the beach?" She laughed, answering, "I'll take that as a yes. Call Tony. I need to go to work, but I'll be back by 6. See you later." With a final click, I closed my laptop and immediately called Tom Sweet. "Make sure all the papers are ready by Thursday," I instructed, detailing exactly how I wanted them delivered. "It will cost a bit more," he warned. "That's fine with me," I replied. Leaving my neighborhood, I drove across town and stopped at a modest motel. Conveniently, there was a bar with a restaurant nearby, the perfect spot for the 3 nights I planned to spend there. The bar was lively, with an incredible atmosphere. Every evening I'd stop by, and every night a few single women would approach my table, clearly not wanting me to be alone. On the first night, a striking blonde came over. "Come on, honey, that's our song," she teased, pulling me onto the dance floor. As we danced, she leaned closer. "Don't get any ideas, darling. I'm not looking for anything serious. I just enjoy dancing, and you happen to be here." Her name was Scarlett. When the music faded, she introduced me to her friends, Laura and Olivia, and invited me to join their table. We spent the evening dancing and talking, and as I was leaving, Scarlett gave me a smile. "We're here a few times a week." I nodded. "Then maybe we'll see each other again." I hadn't felt so light and free in a long time. The next day, precisely at 3 p.m., I parked on a side street near my house, reviewing the surveillance footage. 2 young men whom Emma had invited into our bedroom looked at least 10 years younger than her. I wondered what drew her to them. Perhaps their energy. Nothing shocking in what I saw. Everything unfolded predictably and familiarly. But seeing my wife with them was still unpleasant. I turned up the volume, assuming she might say something disparaging about me. But she didn't mention me, except when one of the men asked if they could meet more often. Emma simply apologized, "Sorry, but my husband comes first." On Wednesday night, it happened again. I was only mentioned once when she reminded them to be gone by 5 in the morning. "No one's up at that hour, but I want you out before anyone notices," she told them. By Thursday morning, they had indeed left, and I contacted my lawyer to reschedule the document delivery for Friday. On Friday at 6 a.m., I parked nearby. Just 10 minutes later, the front door opened, and the 2 men left. After saying goodbye to Emma, they noticed a man at the door, who approached and handed her the documents, leaving them all stunned. I drove up, honked, made sure Emma saw me, waved, and left. The envelope contained not only legal papers but also a personal letter from me. I wrote that I no longer intended to communicate with her except through attorneys. I wasn't interested in her explanations, empty reassurances, or claims that she loved only me and that her actions with others meant nothing. I didn't want to hear promises that we could work through this, or that our love could withstand this betrayal. I was tired of the cliched words cheating spouses say when caught. As expected, Emma ignored my letter. 10 minutes after I left, she began calling me. I let the calls go to voicemail, as well as the following 7 calls. When I arrived at the office, I spoke to my secretary, Aria. "I'm done with Emma. Don't put her calls through to me." She nodded, and as I headed to my office, another thought occurred to me. Oh, and Arya, if she shows up here, tell her I'm in a meeting with a client. Arya gave a sympathetic smile. Of course, Mr. Burns. A few minutes later, I approached the reception desk to speak with Victoria. If my wife comes by, call me immediately and hold her up so I can slip out the side door. I'll wait at the cafe until she's gone. Victoria nodded confidently. Don't worry, Mr. Burns. I felt a wave of relief, realizing once again how fortunate I was to have such reliable employees. That day, Emma called my phone 21 times, and I ignored every call. Over lunch, I called my father and brother to tell them about the situation. I asked my father to inform my mother, and if possible, to discourage her from trying to convince me to reconcile with Emma. I'll try, my father replied, but you know how much your mother is attached to her. The road ahead didn't promise to be easy. I took a deep and steady breath. My mother had always seen Emma as the daughter she never had, a person who had brought a near-family warmth into our lives. As the workday drew to a close, I decided to stay late instead of hurrying home and focused on finishing a few urgent tasks. Around 5 o'clock, Arya stopped by to say goodbye. See you tomorrow, Mr. Burns, she said, and then added, Oh, by the way, your wife called 7 times before noon. Each time I reminded her of your instructions not to put her through. It seems she finally got the hint. She hasn't called since. I thanked her and worked diligently until 7. When I finally reached the lobby, Victoria had already left, and Hank, our night guard, had taken his usual position at the reception desk. Planning to spend the evening with your wife? He asked with a smile. What makes you think that? I replied. She's waiting for you outside, he said, nodding towards the parking lot. Hank, we're in the process of a divorce, I explained. She wants to talk, but I'd rather avoid it. If she knocks, don't let her in, please. If she tries the intercom, tell her you're alone and that my car is still in the lot because it won't start. Tell her it'll be towed in the morning. No problem, Mr. Burns. Divorces aren't easy. I've been through 2, so I understand, Hank replied. I nodded my thanks and exited through the back door to avoid Emma. I circled the building, crossed the street, and entered Dave's diner through the back. From my seat, I could see Emma still waiting by my car. I ordered the daily special and watched her as I ate. Midway through dessert, she approached the building and pressed the intercom. It seemed Hank was following the plan. After a short wait, she returned to her car and eventually drove away. I finished my dessert, lingered over a cup of coffee, and then left the diner. Later that evening, I headed to a bar for a couple of beers. A few women were sitting alone, casting glances around for company, but I wasn't interested in socializing. I had 2 drinks and decided to call it a night. Saturday was going to be busy, with plenty of loose ends to tie up before I officially served Emma with the divorce papers. I only hoped I hadn't waited too long. First, I stopped by the bank and cleared out our joint accounts. I retrieved my personal documents and certificates from the safety deposit box, leaving Emma's belongings inside. I took off my wedding ring and placed it in the box, knowing she'd find it there. Then I went to a diner for breakfast and used the phone to cancel our joint credit cards. I kept only the Visa and American Express in my name. Emma had her own cards, so I just ensured she couldn't withdraw from our shared accounts. After breakfast, I returned to the motel, parked, and ordered a taxi to the nearest rental office. I rented the cheapest car they had, went back to the motel, and spent the day reading by the pool. Before dinner, I checked my phone for messages. There were 15 messages from Emma. I deleted them all and turned my phone off again. Later that evening, I found myself back at the bar, which was packed, with a live band playing. I sat at the counter and ordered a beer. About halfway through, I felt someone tug on my shirt, and I turned to see Scarlett smiling. "Hey, stranger," she greeted me. "Why sit here alone when we've got a spot for you at our table?" "I didn't even notice you in this crowd," I replied with a smile. "But even if I had, I wouldn't have thought I'd be welcome." "Don't be silly," she laughed, pulling me toward their table. Laura and Olivia were there as well, and I greeted them as I sat down. "Something doesn't add up," I said, looking at them. "Three beautiful women sitting here alone, and you had to come and drag me over. Something doesn't quite fit." "We get enough attention," Scarlett replied, "but usually from guys who don't understand a thing. People notice the wedding rings on our fingers and immediately make assumptions. They think we're wives here for a thrill, hoping to start a fling. But we're simply here to dance, though only a few understand that. Most see themselves as irresistible, leaving us to fend off their advances. Last night only confirmed what I had long suspected. I'm the safe guy in their eyes." Scarlett, with a mischievous glint in her eye, said, "We know you're one of the good ones." She even added, "You can join us whenever you want." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "You might say it's none of my business, but I'm curious. Why are three beautiful married women here without their husbands?" Scarlett thought for a moment, then nodded. "Good question. Laura's husband is in the reserves. He's been deployed. She started feeling lonely, so we decided to bring her along. Olivia's husband works night shifts, and mine is a long-haul trucker who's often on the road, so we stick together and come here to dance." She looked at me, studying my face. "What about you? I noticed you used to wear a ring, but it's gone now." "I handed my wife divorce papers yesterday," I replied without going into details. "Left the ring so she'd find it." Laura leaned closer, curiosity on her face. "So, you're free now?" I quickly shook my head. "Not at all. The divorce is because she cheated, and I don't want to give her any chance to use that against me in court." Laura smiled. "Great. Then we have a safe dance partner." I spent the rest of the night dancing with Scarlett, Laura, and Olivia, allowing them to choose partners among the men they liked from time to time. When the bar finally closed, I returned to my motel, feeling a surprising sense of calm for the first time in a long while. Sunday was quiet. I spent it by the pool, reading. On Monday, I returned to work, renting a car so Emma would think I was still out of town. She didn't stop calling all week, anywhere from 6 to 20 times a day. I ignored every call. Twice she called from unknown numbers, but as soon as I heard her voice, I hung up immediately. Each evening after work, I'd drop by the bar for a couple of beers. On Wednesday and Friday, Scarlett, Laura, and Olivia were there again, and we danced until 10 on Wednesday and until closing on Friday. By Saturday, I thought Emma might have gotten the hint. So on Monday, I returned the rental car and drove my own again. That was a mistake. Leaving work that Monday, I saw Emma parked right next to my car. As soon as she spotted me, she got out and blocked my way to the driver's door. "We need to talk, Matteo," she said. I tried to open the door, but she stood in front, preventing me from passing. "Please, Matteo, just hear me out." I gently nudged her aside, and though she staggered, she stayed in place. Once in the car, I rolled down the window just enough to talk. "Emma, go back and reread the letter I sent with the divorce papers. I'm not speaking to you unless it's through my lawyer, and only about the divorce." "I don't want a divorce, Matteo. Please don't do this," she pleaded. "Emma, it's over. Accept it. I'm not changing my mind." I rolled up the window and drove off, leaving her there. By Tuesday, however, it became clear she wasn't ready to leave me alone. As I headed toward my car after work, two men approached, each grabbing one of my arms. I recognized them immediately. They were the same men I had found in my bedroom with Emma. One of them sneered, "Don't make this difficult, old man, and nothing bad will happen. Miss Emma says you're being uncooperative and wants to talk to you. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but you're coming with us." Although I was only 6 or 7 years older than these two, they talked to me as if I was some fragile office worker. They had no idea. They wouldn't realize what hit them. My plan was simple. Take down one of them with a sudden blow, then deal with the other. I was confident I'd manage. The last thing I wanted was to make a scene that might disrupt Emma's carefully orchestrated abduction. But I stopped to think, did I truly want to be part of this? If she was willing to go to such extreme lengths to lure me here, who knew what else she might do if I started to resist? If I had sent her assistants back in less than ideal shape, the situation could quickly spiral out of control. So, I allowed them to escort me into the car, gripping my suitcase tightly as they drove me to the house. When we arrived, Emma instructed her hired goons to seat me in a chair and ensure I stayed put. She looked at me with a strange expression, a mixture of resolve and triumph, and announced, "We're not getting divorced." I tried to stand up, but the men held me down. One of them leaned in and whispered, "Sit quietly if you value your health." Emma continued, "We're staying married, but things are going to be different now." "I'm sorry you had to find out about my condition," she said, shrugging with feigned indifference. "But since you know, you'll have to accept it. I love you, believe it or not, but I do, and I'm not letting you go." Condition? What was she even talking about? "What condition are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "I'm addicted to intimacy since high school. You triggered it when we first got together." I shook my head in disbelief. "That's absurd," I replied. "There's treatment for that." "There is," she answered, with a smile that did nothing to ease my mind. "I've tried everything, but they all make me apathetic and tired. That's not how I want to live. Besides, I enjoy it. I enjoy intimacy. You know that. I'm practically always with you. What I do doesn't harm you after all, and you're the one I love. I even spoil you. And what does it matter if I seek what you can't always provide? If you could be there every second, I'd need no one else. But since you can't, I have my needs. I always come back to you. That's what counts." She pulled out a stack of papers and handed them to me. "This is how it's going to be now. Here's a prenuptial agreement. You agree that I can have other lovers whenever I want. But if you leave, you get nothing." I stared at her in stunned silence. "And what do I get from this arrangement, other than a wife who's with other people?" I asked. "You get the same devoted wife you've had all these years. You thought our marriage was perfect, despite everything. The only thing that's changed now is your wounded pride. Nothing needs to change, except your acceptance of the situation." "This doesn't mean you aren't enough for me. You're a wonderful partner. You satisfy me, but you can't meet all my needs," she said, looking straight into my eyes. "Here's what I think, Emma." She flinched. She'd never liked it when I addressed her so directly by name. "I'll sign the agreement if you agree to a few changes," I said. A flicker of curiosity crossed her eyes. "What changes?" "First, no intimacy with me on days you're with others, and we'll have separate bedrooms." "No," she replied, instantly rejecting it. "I need you in my bed. Don't you understand? I love you and don't want to lose you." I answered calmly, "Then don't demand these terms. I wasn't planning on signing this absurd contract." Her frustration was obvious. "Fine," she muttered, annoyed. "I'll make the changes and bring it back. You'll end up back in my bed anyway." She stormed out of the room, mumbling something about updating the document on her computer. I tried to stand, but her goons held me back. "I need to use the restroom," I said, to which one of them smirked. "Too bad. Miss Emma said you're not moving until she decides. So if you've got to go, you'll just have to hold it." After several tense minutes, Emma returned, holding an updated document in her hands. She scanned it quickly and asked with finality in her voice, "Where do I sign?" I pointed to the pen she was gripping tightly and replied, "Your guards aren't even letting me stand." She turned to them and with a sharp nod ordered, "Let him go." As I stood up, I approached her, placed my briefcase on the table and took the pen. Instead of signing, I set it aside. To be absolutely sure, I'll double-check everything. I scrutinized the document, and after a few moments, smirked and tore it in half, tossing the pieces back at Emma. With my briefcase in hand, I headed for the door. "Stop him!" Emma's voice rang out across the room, and two men blocked my path. As they drew closer, I swung my briefcase, striking the first one squarely in the head. He collapsed immediately. The second man, stunned, stumbled, giving me the chance to hit him in the face. As he staggered, I swiftly kneed him in the groin, and he crumpled to the floor. Seizing the moment, I delivered a few kicks to their stomachs, ribs, and heads, but suddenly Emma's panicked voice broke through. "Matteo, stop or I'll shoot!" I looked up to see her aiming a Colt at me. I smirked and said, "Go ahead, shoot if you really have to." Calmly, I pulled out my phone and dialed emergency services. "My wife is threatening me with a weapon," I informed the operator. The operator urged me to stay calm and assured me that help was on the way. After finishing the call, I turned to Emma and said, "Thank you, Emma. This will only make the divorce and your eventual arrest easier." She sneered. "That was a foolish stunt, Matteo. When the police arrive, it's you who will be in handcuffs," she replied with cold confidence. "You barged in here, saw me with friends, lost your temper, and started a fight. It'll be 3 statements against 1, and besides, we're all fully dressed. You'll look like the aggressor." Her smugness made me chuckle. "Amazing, Emma. You truly shine with your charm." "Don't worry, Matteo," she sneered. "I'll cover your bail. Barry and Tony won't press charges. This will all blow over soon." I shook my head. "Not quite, Emma. Hank, the neighbor, saw those 2 idiots dragging me inside after work, and Joyce was watching everything from her yard. The truth was, I'd been brought here against my will. When I tried to leave, her 2 friends blocked my way. They'd failed, so she resorted to pulling a gun. I might spend the night in a cell, but with witnesses on my side, the charges would be against her, and I definitely wouldn't be the one paying for her release. I added, "Let's see, kidnapping, unlawful detention, armed threat, and false testimony. I might be missing something, but it's in your best interest to keep quiet, Emma." Ignoring my warning, Emma and her cronies stuck to their fabricated story when the police arrived, and I was detained for the night. The next morning, I contacted Tom Sweet, told him the situation, and asked him to coordinate with Gaston Marshall to obtain the security footage. Emma soon realized that my release would require a judge's approval, which wouldn't happen until Monday. Fortunately, Tom had a friend in the district attorney's office who reviewed the footage, which showed Barry and Tony holding me while Emma aimed a gun at me, threatening me. The video even captured her admitting that she planned to lie to the police. When Emma arrived for my bail hearing, she was the one being arrested. Barry and Tony soon followed her. Warrants for their arrests were issued that evening. I refused to post bail for Emma, and her parents couldn't afford it either. Her lawyer suggested using our house as collateral, but I just laughed and hung up. I went home, changed the locks, and filed for a restraining order to keep her away from me. As unforgettable as Emma was, no relationship is worth the risk of ending up in jail. Ultimately, Barry and Tony testified against her to reduce their own sentences. Later, Emma insisted she would never have shot, claiming she was only trying to stop me from hurting her friends. Her defense managed to convince the jury to acquit her of threatening with a weapon, but she was found guilty of unlawful detention, filing a false report, and several other minor offenses. The judge's decision was firm: 9 months in county jail and 1,000 hours of community service. While I served my time, the divorce was finalized, and my 30% share of the house's value was promptly transferred to her account. After my release, I found myself in a bar near the motel that had become my temporary refuge, and fate smiled on me. Scarlett and Olivia were already there. I invited them to celebrate my newfound freedom. Laura didn't come. She was with her husband, who had just returned from service. Scarlett looked at me with curiosity in her eyes. "Why are you celebrating with us?" she asked. I smirked. "Why not?" I replied, giving her space to draw her own conclusions. Noticing the wedding rings on Laura and Olivia's fingers, I observed that Scarlett's hand was bare. No ring, no faint tan line, no sign that anyone was waiting for her. "Besides, I've always had a thing for blondes," I added. Olivia burst into laughter as I took Scarlett by the hand and led her to the dance floor. Leaving my old life behind, especially the house, felt like closing an important chapter. I expected it to hurt, to feel anger or heartbreak, but instead a strange calm settled over me, as if the truth I'd been running from had finally come to light. And although it stung, there was a sense of relief that only honesty can bring. To my surprise, the months after the divorce were less frightening than I had anticipated. I didn't miss Emma as a person, and didn't long for the past, only occasionally recalling our small rituals that now felt hollow, exposed by how long estrangement had silently seeped into our marriage. To cope, I threw myself completely into work, staying late, exhausting myself to the point where I had no strength left to think. But I knew I couldn't hide from my thoughts forever. There were always the quiet hours alone at home. And then I realized this was my chance to start fresh. With Emma's betrayal finally behind me, I was free to rebuild my life. I began with small changes around the house, especially in the bedroom, which had once felt fraught with tension. I changed the bedding, rearranged the furniture, and refreshed the walls with a new coat of paint, transforming it into a cozy place that felt genuinely mine. As I removed things that reminded me of the past, the space became lighter, like a suit of armor I no longer had to wear. Every item I removed, and each new thing I added made the house truly mine. The past still lived in the walls, but it no longer weighed on me. Sometimes I wondered if our relationship could have turned out differently, but such thoughts quickly faded. I knew our collapse wasn't solely my fault. I had given my love and trust to someone who didn't deserve them, and that was a burden I didn't have to carry alone. Gradually, Scarlett became more than just an acquaintance. Our chance encounters evolved into something more, drawing me to her in ways that surprised me. Her grounded warmth was sincere, a stark contrast to the empty ideal I had once chased with Emma. Scarlett taught me that happiness isn't found in perfection, but in appreciating simple, everyday moments. As our connection deepened, I began to envision a future untethered from my past. I wasn't ready for a serious relationship yet. I needed to reclaim myself first. Scarlett seemed to understand this and was content with our current state, giving me the space to heal and rediscover myself beyond the shadow of a broken marriage. She never pressured me or demanded more than I was willing to give. She was simply there, and somehow her presence alone was enough. As the months passed, I gradually started opening up to new experiences. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen since college or even high school, realizing how much my life with Emma had consumed me, allowing those old connections to fade unnoticed. I started running again after neglecting it for many years, and unexpectedly, I found peace in the steady rhythm. These early morning runs quickly became my favorite time of day. Just me, the empty streets, and the sound of my footsteps on the pavement. I also started exploring new hobbies I had never even considered while I was with Emma. Cooking, for example, was something I'd never been good at, but now it became a challenge I gladly embraced. Through trial and error, I slowly improved, feeling an incredible satisfaction in creating something from scratch and realizing that self-care went far beyond meeting basic needs. In many ways, this process felt like rebuilding myself, step by step, meal by meal, day by day. There were, of course, hard days when old memories would surface unexpectedly, moments that left me feeling lost. But over time, these moments became less frequent, and the pain gradually subsided. Month after month, a quiet hope began to take its place, hope that I could create a future for myself, one that was more genuine and fulfilling than ever before. Scarlett and I continued to spend time together, and in time, a deeper bond blossomed between us. It wasn't the intense romance I had once experienced with Emma, but perhaps that's why everything felt so right. Our relationship was built on trust and respect, on a slow, gradual understanding of each other with no need to rush. We let everything unfold naturally, and that pace was exactly what we needed. One evening, sitting on the porch under a starry sky, Scarlett turned to me and asked, "Do you ever wonder how things would have turned out if your life with Emma had been different?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No, I replied. If things had been different with her, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't have learned what I needed to, and I wouldn't have met you. She gave me a soft, understanding smile, and we sat together in comfortable silence, both content with the present, free from the shadows of the past. Looking back, I realized that every painful experience I'd gone through, heartbreak, losses, betrayal, had led me to this moment. It was all part of my journey, and though I would never wish such pain on anyone, I wouldn't change a thing, because it was through these hardships that I gained clarity and peace. I no longer saw myself as someone whose life was defined by others' choices. I saw myself as someone who had endured, grown stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the future might bring. This was now my story, my life to live on my terms. Whatever the future held, I knew I would face it with a resilient heart, clear eyes, and a renewed understanding of my own strength. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a true and profound sense of freedom, a freedom that was entirely mine. 15 months later, Scarlett and I married, and she was expecting our child, the happiest news of all. As for Emma, it turned out later that she had been placed under mandatory treatment in a psychiatric clinic after harassing a police officer. Perhaps she truly had an addiction, but that was no longer my concern. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.